3 a.m. UK time on Boxing Day morning 2017, or nearly lunchtime in the Tokyo newsroom. The homepage editor has been attempting to update the beta website for some time, but is running into trouble. Only 10% of customers are enrolled in the beta website, and in UK hours that could be rolled back. But the editor is concerned because content has begun disappearing from the new CMS, and some menus are now completely blank. What would you do? Call support. And so a call goes out, it turns into a page for the engineering team, and by 5 a.m. UK time, the issue is resolved. An article about Australia buying strawberries from Japan had become stuck, causing a surprising amount of disruption as ETL spiraled out of control. How did we get here? I'm Alex, an engineer and NFT professional, and today I wanted to share a difficult chapter of our journey with Nikkei Asia and what we did about it, which I'm calling the story of the magic button. Starting at the beginning, in 2017, Nikkei began 2 partnership programs with the FT to combine our efforts and to learn from each other. One program was Scout Asia, a brand new intelligence product for markets in Asia, which lent on machine learning to extract deep insights from many publications, including the Nikkei and the FT. And the other program was a 3-year partnership with Nikkei Asia, at the time called Nikkei Asian Review, or NAR for short. Nikkei Asia is to Asia as the Wall Street Journal is to America, providing deep coverage and analysis across the region. A high-level objective was to establish a product development practice with Nikkei Asia, and our first task was to collaboratively refresh the website and publishing tools, which seemed like an exciting challenge. We needed to do this as smoothly as possible, avoiding disruption to customers and to the active newsrooms around the world. Our colleague, Anya Oshinska, goes into a lot more detail about this in her excellent delivery room talk, so I won't recap in too much detail. But in short, we had a very ambitious timeline, and we started in June. Since we were a new program, and due to the complexities of communicating between time zones, our communication was very limited, and we hadn't spent much time with the newsroom. However, we had a copy of the CMS codebase without its database, and extensive documentation provided by Nikkei about how it worked. And so between the time zone differences, we thought it would make sense to start by building on our existing knowledge of the CMS. What did that look like? We codenamed the old stack last NAR and the new stack next NAR. And from a high-level infrastructure perspective, they were fairly similar. 2 content management systems powering 2 front ends, 2 content delivery networks, and a then out-of-scope access and identity platform. There were some other integrations, such as the newsletter platform and a magical system called Neo, but these didn't seem important. After simplifying the infrastructure by getting fastly in front of both systems, we started looking at getting the new websites, building the new websites and CMS. Somehow we needed to get content into it, and that's where content migration comes in, a process we nicknamed ETL. For those who aren't familiar, ETL, or Extract, Transform, Load, is an architectural pattern for moving large amounts of data from one system to another. Our workflow, inspired by database replication, was that we'd download an old article, we'd transform its body and metadata into the new formats, and then overwrite that data into the new CMS. Effectively, everything the old CMS has, we upgrade and prefer over anything we already have. We wrote a small extension to the old CMS, which would send us a webhook whenever something changed. We started logging these and sending them to a queue called updates. And we later added a worker process into the mix, which would read from the updates queue, perform the mapping process, and overwrite whatever the CMS already had. Finally, we built another process called continuous ingestion, which asked the CMS for all articles ever written and added them slowly in priority batches to the update queue, low priority batches. Over the course of a couple of weeks, that would bring in all 140,000 old CMS entries. And this 3-step CMS process seemed to make a lot of sense. And after a few problems fine-tuning our database to support the amount of data we were importing, we managed to get the whole thing up and running at the start of October. I guess we're running a bit late. The redevelopment of the website was going quite well, however, and so, and with designs that got everyone excited, it looked like a beta launch was coming. So anyway, let me ask you a question. What happens when someone revises an article or publishes an urgent correction? And where do print articles come from? Oh, okay, I guess we hadn't thought about that. The next few days and weeks were interesting, to say the least. We learned a lot about edge cases, which it turned out weren't edge cases. Thankfully, the beta website wasn't live yet, so we had the time to tackle some of these problems. One major problem was that we hadn't built in a locking mechanism, meaning that an article published twice in rapid succession would send us multiple updates. It turned out that editing, final approving, and publishing an article all came through as separate updates and happened as a rapid succession of clicks for the majority of content. So we'd get 3 updates instead of 1. And our queue was asynchronous, and so those updates didn't always come through in the right order. Between too many updates and unpredictable ordering, through very exciting race conditions, we'd end up corrupting individual articles. That's what happened with the strawberries in December. Applying the 5 whys, our real problem was that the real-world usage and workflows didn't match what the API had suggested was possible. Publications, revisions, and approvals all caused problems. And by starting with the technology, we made something that technically worked, but most of the decisions we'd made along the way had been optimized for all the wrong things. You may have heard of the popular urban legend of a library sinking into the ground because in planning, the architects had forgotten to account for the weight of the books. This was our version of that, and we were left with the exact same sinking feeling. Speed became our later problem. While originally quite quick, the addition of safeguards, and including locking and workflow verification, meant that articles would occasionally take up to 10 minutes to update, which isn't great for breaking news. And at the end of it all, we realized we'd made some major mistakes and were left wondering, how did we miss this? We needed to do something. So firstly, can we make article updates instantaneous? Well, no, but maybe we can give people more control. So we proposed a button and off the cuff described it as being a bit like a magic button. That name stuck, which I'm secretly happy about. The button would invoke all of the import process, directly skipping any workers or queues, allowing content to be imported in real time. It was really slow, about 30 seconds, but it was huge because even the first release, which showed incredibly unfriendly and incomprehensible error messages, allowed everyone to see exactly what was happening and how quickly, making it much easier to identify when something had actually broken. We iterated on this a tiny bit, adding in friendlier error messages and taking the time to filter out unrelated events, such as approvals. We also added in a synthetic test inspired by the FT's content platform, a known article that would go through the process and would happen regularly, so we'd be able to spot if something had gone wrong. And secondly, we moved as much configuration as possible to a Google Sheet. Unfortunately, I don't have access to it anymore, which allowed for anyone with access to update how metadata would be mapped from the old CMS to the new one. These 2 steps gave a much greater degree of control to the newsroom, and we ended up with virtually no new support calls for ETL. And through all of this, we made the content migration process so reliable that users didn't want us to switch it off after the CMS switchover. The ability to import backups from the old CMS had become a popular way of using it as a photo archive. Later, we moved that to PhotoWare. This photo was the first article successfully published from the new CMS, originally authored in the old one, which had been a monumental team effort realized in 2018. And I'm happy to say that this was by far the hardest part of our journey with Nikkei Asia. In reflecting how we got here, we ended up reestablishing our relationships and redefining how we'd work together, which is something that my colleagues Anya and Claire have gone into in their own talks. And ultimately, we were successful. We parted ways in late 2020, and since then, they shipped a new app and a new paywall. Why have I brought this up? Well, sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones because they allow you to make a start. By focusing on solving our user problem first and literally bringing a massive button into the CMS, we were able to prioritize our other mitigation efforts using something like the action priority matrix. By focusing on high impact, low effort tasks, we were able to bring a bias for action, which allowed us to avoid a major rewrite. First came the button without any UI. Another iteration brought in the ability to paste in a URL for unpublished articles from the old CMS. And a later brought in brought in friendlier error messages. And the entire time, and with each iteration, we were able to rewrite and move code between components, gradually improving the process. The architecture remained similar, but the impact of these improvements was huge. Seek early feedback, and when you can't get it, insist on it. Many of our challenges would have gone away entirely had we piloted our efforts much earlier and validated our system. We were only able to make this a success story because we began gathering user feedback. From the way that pages were curated through to what controls were needed during content migration, the continuous feedback cycle we started here became crucial when redeveloping the rest of the CMS. Prioritize understanding requirements and defining done. This chapter was the first, and with the benefit of hindsight, our largest step in our journey towards quality in Nikkei Asia. We defined a quality strategy in 2018 with the tagline, slow down to speed up. By slowing down and really understanding our requirements and defining done, we were able to bring much more autonomy to people in every time zone. And that led us to being able to ship much, much faster. It's a bit unintuitive, but in an environment like ours, where you have a fixed timescale and it's difficult to identify requirements on the fly, you can afford to spend a little more time identifying risks and opportunities before starting. As we progressed in 2018 and embraced agile roadmaps, we introduced this into our Kanban process and started proactively flagging unknowns early and conducting research during our discovery process, which gave us the ability to really, really prioritize. And why is that important? Well, sort of business requirements aside, there's something to be said of technical discovery. After we launched the new CMS, I learned from a colleague at Nikkei that we'd totally missed a trick. There was already a notifications mechanism in the form of that magical system called Neo. And there was already a public API built off of that by our Nikkei team during the redevelopment of Nikkei.com. And the signs were all there that it did this. We built this very late. We built this integration very late and then initially deprioritized it. It turned out that that was the way that Scout Asia got our content into their CMS. And so we really missed a trick. Thanks for listening. And one more thing, we have merch. So if you have any questions or you want a sticker, get in touch. Thank you.